Most people think strength is big and loud. They watch the strong take the wind and assume the weak will always lose. But sometimes the smallest hearts keep going when the rest give up. And that changes everything. I'm the voice of Zavian tales. Today, I'll tell you about Ari and a sparrow that would not stop. By the end, you'll see how steady effort outlives sudden strength. Ari was 21 and small for his age. He had thin shoulders, soft brown hair that never quite stayed neat, and a pocket of coins that felt too light in his hand. He lived in a house with a cracked clay floor and a kitchen where steam always smelled of rice and memory. Every morning he walked the same path to the river and returned with small things: a handful of clay, a bent nail, a broken bowl someone else had left. He fixed what he could and sold it cheaply at the market, because pride was a choice he could not afford. People called him Little Ari, with a laugh that sounded almost kind. He smiled back, but his smile carried a quiet ache, like someone learning to make do with less. When boys from the next village raced across the ridge, Ari watched them jump and shout, then tucked his chin and kept mending. He tried to speak up at the market, but found his voice swallowed by louder sellers. Once a child stepped on his repaired toy and tore it. Ari knelt, breath held, and stitched it again with trembling fingers while the child ran away. The ache was small and constant. He wanted to matter in a world that noticed only those who made noise. At home he kept a thin journal, pages dog-eared, where he drew small maps and tiny plans. Each sketch was a promise he rarely said aloud. He longed to do something big, but his days were full of small tasks: sweeping the yard, carrying water, polishing a spoon until the metal shone. Those tasks seemed meaningless to others. To Ari, they were all he could control. Old Musa arrived the size and the winds grew mean. He was 74, with a gray beard that tangled into the lines of his face, calm eyes that held a steady flame, and a robe threadbare at the elbows. He moved slowly, carrying a small wooden box of seeds and a walking stick carved by his own hand. People bowed when he passed, not because he ordered it, but because his presence folded the hurry in on itself. One afternoon, Ari found Musa by the river, watching a sparrow struggle against a fierce gust. The sparrow clung to a reed, trembling but refusing to let go. Ari muttered about the bird's smallness. Musa smiled and asked, "What do you see, boy?" Ari shrugged. "It's too small. It should fly away." Musa reached into his box and took out a single seed, held it between two wrinkled fingers, and said, "Plant that seed in the hardest soil you can find." Ari blinked. Musa's face didn't change. "Tell me what happens." Musa didn't lecture. He only walked with Ari to a patch of cracked earth and pressed the seed into a shallow dent. Then he walked away slowly and left the sound of his sandals on the path. Over the next days, Musa asked for nothing but watched. When Ari asked for advice, Musa answered with a short question or pointed silently at the seed. The lesson was small and patient. Strength is not always the first burst of wind. Sometimes it is the thing that remains when the wind has passed. Weeks passed. Ari began to mimic the seed's quiet plan. He woke earlier to fetch water, then stayed later to mend another thing. He practiced speaking to neighbors with one short, clear sentence, even when his voice shook. He collected small coins and hid them in the hem of his shirt. He returned to the reed by the river and watched the sparrow each morning. It still looked fragile, but it returned, day after day, gripping whatever stem it could find. At first, nothing seemed different. Boys still laughed when Ari's cart creaked, and a merchant accused him of undercutting with cheap repairs. Once a heavy storm tore down a neighbor's stall. Ari rushed to help and, exhausted, missed work for 2 days. "You waste time," someone muttered. Ari almost stopped. He lay awake and listened to the wind, thinking of quick failure, of talent that soared once and was gone. The sparrow stayed in his thoughts, how it kept returning to the reed no matter how many times it was blown away. Months later, small changes stacked like dry stones. Ari's hands moved faster, steadier. He learned the exact bend that made a pot handle hold. People began to trust that his repairs lasted. One morning, after a long season of steady work, the village faced a surprise storm that threw the big birds of the valley into confusion. They took off searching for shelter and flew low, buffeted by wind. Ari, who had been out securing loose items and helping neighbors, climbed to the little ridge and saw the bigger birds scatter. One after another, they lost sight of the path and drifted beyond the valley. Ari felt a strange calm. He had no great wings, only many small acts behind him. He called to the villagers, led them with clear directions he had practiced giving, and helped guide frightened animals and people to shelter. The sparrow he had watched all season appeared on his shoulder, trembling but steady. The villagers, who once overlooked him, saw that steady hands and patient habit were what kept a small place safe when sudden strength failed. One evening the wind rose fierce and sudden. Big birds panicked and flew low, crashing into thickets or drifting far beyond known paths. The village bell had cracked and could not call people in time. Ari ran to the ridge and shouted the directions he had practiced in whispered moments. He led a line of villagers with steady hands along the river bend to a low stone shelter. The sparrow landed on his shoulder and stayed. When the storm cleared, the larger birds had scattered and lost their way. People who had relied on quick, showy strength were stranded. The villagers huddled, safe, around Ari, who had no showy heroics, only repetition, small courage, and habit. Their eyes were different now. Not loud admiration, but quiet respect. Ari felt the ache ease into something like warmth. It was not triumph because he was bigger. It was recognition that small, steady things had held the village together. Most people believe the loud beginning wins. You watch the flash and call it power. But true staying power is quiet. It is the thing you do when no one watches. It is how you show up the 21st day, the 30th stitch, the next morning after a failure. You are not weak for being small. You are only unfinished if you stop. Small habits repeat themselves into skill. Small efforts, day after day, become the map others follow when tides turn. When talent burns bright and fast, it often needs a guide. Most people forget that a steady pair of hands can move a whole village when a great wing loses its way. Carry this. Do the small work. Keep the same pace. Practice your one sentence, your one repair, your one act of care. Over time, those small things will outlast sudden strength. The unforgettable truth is simple and true. Persistence outlives talent when talent quits. I remember a time I thought loud starts meant sure endings. I chased applause and learned it fades. The quiet work taught me better. Steady effort, patience, and the courage to keep going when nothing changes on the surface. If this story touched you, subscribe and join Zavian Tales. Here, you will find stories that help you think better, live wiser, and grow stronger.